Please welcome Concordia's Matthew Swift and David Simas of Emerson Collective.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope everyone's day is off to a good start. I'm so excited to be sitting here with David Simas, former political director for President Obama, former head of the Obama Foundation, and now at Emerson Collective. David, it's great to have you here.
So good to be here, Matthew. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to talk about this.
I know. We are talking about data in our elections. I'm not sure there's a more relevant topic right now. We're what, 50 days out?
We are 42 days, 43 days out.
In about 13 hours. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's set the scene for us right now, because it seems like there is just this rapid change in technology to be able to dig into voting patterns, why people think the way they think.
Right.
We're here in New York during the UN General Assembly. I think all of those from outside of the U.S. want to know exactly what's happening here. You are data-driven, not even really politically driven anymore, data-driven. Talk about what you are seeing big picture in terms of the advancement of data analysis and our politics.
Okay, so let me just begin by answering the question all of you have. I have no idea what's going to happen. So now that we've level set, this is the first snap election in American presidential history. Like, just anchor around that fact. That on July 20th, when you just look across the data, you see that President Biden was trailing former President Trump by about 8% in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. That projects to a landslide victory for former President Trump. If you just look at Pennsylvania, the number of undecided and third-party voters on July 21st was 17%. Within 2 weeks, that had dropped down to 8%, and all of those voters had gravitated to Vice President Harris. So essentially, we have been in this moment of equilibrium where, again, both campaigns are looking at a reality where 5% of the electorate, on an assumption of between 145 million and 150 million voters, are undecided. And so what do they do now in terms of really digging into, in this era, 5% of the electorate who may or may not vote and are deciding literally in a 50-50 dynamic between Harris and Trump, with essentially 6 weeks left to go. So what do the campaigns do from a data perspective that just wasn't available before? The movement away from phone polling is almost complete. And essentially what you're seeing are now online panels. And usually they're doing multiple online panels, each of which have their bias, and then you create predictive models. And so you're down to the place where you look at a county in Pennsylvania. You know from the voter file who the voters are. You know what their vote propensities are. And you have predictive models for each one of them, along with consumer data that then allows you to begin to target and individualize the information they're receiving in ways that have never been possible before. And so in some ways, it's both a radical new approach, but in other ways, it's going back to the way politics were 50, 60, 70 years ago, where each precinct boss knew every single person on that block and what they cared and didn't care about. The difference right now is that it's in the cloud, it's digital, it's ubiquitous, and more intrusive in a way that it never was before.
But wasn't the conclusion from 2016, my God, the data got it wrong? Everybody from the top pollsters that there were got it wrong. So why are we supposed to all of a sudden believe now that the data is getting it right?
Yeah, so here the reality is former President Trump has overperformed his polling in 2016 and 2020. When you listen to pollsters, what they say is that many of the things that they've done have corrected for the misses in the past. We'll see in 43 days whether or not that's the case. But the move to online panels, I think, does that a little bit better. Here's another thing about former President Trump that may lead you to the conclusion that it's been corrected. His favorabilities today are higher than they have ever been. His head-to-head matchup against his Democratic opponent is higher than it's ever been. The assessment of enthusiasm among his voters is higher today than it's ever been. So, if you just look at those measures and you begin to infer, are we capturing, is the industry capturing it, there's some evidence that they are capturing it in ways that they haven't. So there's a lot for Team Trump to be happy about. There's also a lot for Team Harris to be happy about with 6 weeks left to go.
Can you put into context the dramatic shift? As I understand it, we have not seen, an NBC poll came out yesterday, which really highlighted the fact that her favorability numbers had shifted so dramatically that the last time they saw this was for President Bush after 9/11.
It's a hockey stick. I've never seen anything like that professionally in all day. So think about it this way. If on July 20th she was in the mid to high 30s in terms of favorabilities, which was the equivalent of President Biden, within 2 weeks, her numbers had jumped up in terms of favorability to the equivalent of where Donald Trump is. There's no precedent for that. Now, one of the theories is that up until July 21st, President Biden had been underperforming Senate Democratic and House Democratic candidates by a significant margin. And so one idea is there was this pent-up demand that was very Biden-specific, and once he was out of the equation, essentially all of those soft Democratic voters gravitated immediately to her in that rapid pace. And so I think there's some evidence of seeing that, but here's where we are today, which is unprecedented. Depending on the data set that you're looking at, the presidency is a 50-50 proposition. Win probabilities are 50-50, even when you factor in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Wisconsin. And there's a continuum that you look at where you can really say, Matthew, that this election, based on present data, looks like a difference of 25 to 50,000 votes in 3 states. Extraordinary. That's the presidency. Think about the Senate. Most of the projections that I'm seeing are indicating a majority of 1 seat in the Senate. Think about the House. Most of the projections that I'm seeing are looking at a majority for either Democrats or Republicans of 3 seats. You have to go back to 1931, in the midst of the beginning of the Great Depression, to see a political condition where the presidency, put that aside, the Senate and the House essentially have a majority of either 1 to 3 seats in a way that is unprecedented. So when you think about whoever the president is as of January, in terms of the enactment of his or her agenda and that political dynamic in Congress, there's really no precedent for us to look at.
Let's talk a bit about the state of our media. 2 questions for you on this front. First, if you could have it your way, what should all of us change in terms of how we observe an election, especially through the prism of data? What are some suggestions you have to be better informed by data? And then the second thing is, how much of us really not knowing what's going to happen is driven by the fact that you watch one cable news channel and you think you're in one country, and then you turn on the other cable news channel and you feel like you literally are on a different planet?
Yeah, and just thinking about it from cable news perspective is so quaint. And so here are some data points. Among 18 to 25-year-olds in 2020, the average 18 to 25-year-old was consuming 1 hour and 10 minutes per day of social video across the platforms. In 2024, that hour and 10 minutes a day has increased to 2 hours and 45 minutes per day of complete consumption. So the displacement of other media among the youngest, both voters and the non-voters, is radical in a way that I've never seen it. That's fact number one. Fact number two is if you think about the revolution that the For You page brought on TikTok, and this goes to the cable variation point. You download TikTok or now any one of the other apps, the individualization for you means that within a week or so, probably even faster, you're not going to be receiving anything outside of your interest and niche. So think about the 20 to 30% of 18 to 25-year-olds who say, I have no interest in following news, government, or politics. They will never see anything related to that. And to the extent that they do, it's different than watching Fox or CNN or MSNBC because it's tailored to you in real time in a way that you just consume that. And periodically, the only things that will jump into your feed are if there's something popular across the platform that the algorithm will say, oh, I bet you Matthew might like this. And then either you do or you don't. So let's fast forward now 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. From a media consumption perspective, the notion that as we migrate to our devices across these platforms, every single person in this room won't be bifurcated between an MSNBC and a Fox. Each one of you will have a disaggregated media consumption pattern that then from both a social cohesion perspective, a cultural perspective, a political perspective, dramatically changes not just the way we run campaigns, but the way that we engage in society and culture writ large. That's where we're going. And so from a data perspective, understanding that with as much clarity as possible in a way that right now is just really, for me at least, hard to fathom and fully appreciate.
Doesn't that also indicate, though, that if this is the direction we're heading in, this 50-50 dynamic that you're talking about, doesn't that just get more and more and more entrenched? Whereas, and I guess, big picture question, not to put you on the spot, but is this environment here to stay?
Yeah, nothing is ever here to stay.
Okay.
Right? It's like just as soon as you think you're in the new normal, the normal changes. It's my default mode. Whatever it is today, tomorrow is going to be different. Try to get ahead of it and anticipate in some way. So one of the things that we've seen, especially with the gerrymandering in the House, technology and data has made gerrymandering so precise to the block and neighborhood level that you are creating 30 to 40 congressional districts that are almost split down the middle of 50-50. Both sides know this. And so there's this constant fighting for an equilibrium that will shift from moment to moment, event to event, episode to episode. Now, there are some reforms that are occurring. Alaska is the perfect example of a structural reform that takes you out of the normal primary environment that could break us out of this left-right dynamic in a way that could be promising. And so, Matthew, it's the 2028 elections, from artificial intelligence to media segmentation to the split in the House and the Senate, and either the re-election campaign for President Harris or the end of the second term of President Trump will be one of the most extraordinary moments of the integration of media, technology, culture, entertainment, society factors, and democracy that we can ever imagine. So even though we've got 43 days left, boy, I'm beginning to think about that next fight, which just makes me deeply unwell. So.
I do want to say it's pretty extraordinary. You've had an extraordinary career. You were in politics at a city level, a county level, a state level, and a federal level. Yes. But take a minute and just tell everyone what you're currently doing at Emerson Collective.
So Emerson Collective is an extraordinary and amazing organization that engages in media, advocacy, venture. And so I am fortunate enough to be part of a team where if I can add value to my colleagues who are doing transformative work, wonderful. And so it's been a year and a half of being outside of government and politics, and it turns out there is life in the private sector.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Great to be with you today.